My path to becoming a teacher was a circuitous one. My roots are in a culture that is suppressed and broken. My parents' families stem from Ireland and Hungary, from what I've gathered, and their language and culture mostly cast aside in the pursuit of the bait and switch of the white working class American dream. My father disdained school, and my mother dropped out of high school at 16. My grandmother, who gave up teaching prospects herself to marry the son of a coal miner, taught me to read and served as my pre-K. From an early age, stories provided me both an escape from a sometimes harsh life and models of potential lives I'd dream of leading. I was an above average student who eventually hitched my future to classmates who came from college educated families. I found school oppressive, but the library always beckoned, and I graduated from high school with honors and worked my way through a public university in the 1980s and early 1990s. I distinguished myself academically, studying literature and creative writing, but failed to assimilate into academia. Graduate school would have been the natural choice considering my interests, but I felt culturally disassociated from that world. My father said that the only thing my learning was any good for was teaching, and stubbornly I returned to working class work with a bachelor's degree. I remain at 46, the only college educated member of my family. Almost 15 years later, married and living in San Antonio, I followed my wife into an alternative teacher certification program. She and I shared misgivings about educational institutions, having had similar issues finding our way through systems seemingly designed for people other than us. We felt we had gifts to offer and were compelled to advocate for children who might otherwise not flourish. I knew that literacy had saved my life, and I wanted to be of service to my community. I taught for 6 years on the southeast side of San Antonio before a transformational experience with the San Antonio Writing Project Summer Institute drew me into the Masters of Education program at UTSA. My goal was to explore the theoretical frameworks that inform and shape my teaching choices so I could better advocate for students and hopefully reform literacy practices at schools. I also thirsted for the intellectual dialogue that was missing from my professional life. I'm now nearing the end of the MAED program. I was on track to finish and graduate years ago when cancer intervened and forced me to set aside my studies temporarily. I taught through it all, a third child was added to my family, and I'm currently putting it all together before your very eyes. Much of what I've learned in my master's studies has felt like the discoveries of previously unknown kinships, of fulfilled hunches extrapolated in new ways. Vygotsky and Freire are my twin stars to guide me. Together they explain much of my own experience as a learner and guide me to intentionally design learning opportunities and experiences for my students that recognize their voices, power, and potential. I take the constructivist view that knowledge does not exist externally from learners. To know is to construct knowledge in collaboration with others within a cultural context. Vygotsky shows us that learning is socially constructed in collaboration with more capable peers or teachers before the learner is independently capable. Transfer occurs when the learner becomes independently capable of a task that is personally meaningful to them, that she then practices in new or similar social contexts. Motivation for learning is both extrinsic, the quest for social engagement and social reward, and intrinsic, the quest for personal meaning. Learning accelerates just beyond the learner's developmental stage in social contexts that support it, and, quote, children grow into the intellectual life of those around them, end quote. Freire reminds us the necessity of the teacher being a co-learner among students, that an oppositional relation between teacher and students reproduces hegemony and makes liberation impossible. A learning environment that honors Vygotsky can honor Freire as well. Such an environment would emphasize student-centered collaborative learning where students talk and listen to one another in pairs or small groups of mixed ability and interest. The teacher facilitates the learning journey, guiding students to pose problems and co-strategize solutions. Curricular considerations need to balance state and district requirements with the teacher's knowledge of students' culture, interests, and abilities, student choice, voice, and using class time to pursue deep learning outcomes. Not pursuing this balance leaves students at the hands of the state and the hidden curriculum of their economic location, as we saw in Anion. Assessment must be ongoing and focus on informing next steps in learning. Students, not just the teacher, assess themselves and each other. Examples should include essays, creative writing, and multimodal projects. My vision for my 7th grade language arts and reading classroom is ongoing, in effect, and subject to constant reflection and refinement. It begins with the layout of the room. I arrange the students' desks in 2 concentric circles so students are facing the center for seminar-style discussion. I expect and get a diverse group of learners, including gifted and talented, English language learners, students with learning disabilities, dyslexia, and autism spectrum disorder. Descriptors like these can be both helpful and limiting. Students with and without them are all different and take time to get to know. Fortunately, literacy work expedites us getting to know each other. The learners must be interacting, listening, speaking, writing, and reading the maximum amount of time possible during the 45 minutes we have together daily. I devise a schedule of literacy routine activities that we cycle through each week to make this possible. Students who choose their own independent reading are more likely to persist with text beyond their independent level because it is engaging and personally meaningful for them. Flexible pairings and groupings are used for students to discuss their independent reading, so more able readers can model literate thinking, decision-making, and problem-solving. Writing conferences between peers allow students with a variety of needs and gifts to help one another improve their expression. Conversations become the catalyst for community building around both independent and shared reading and writing journeys. As teacher facilitator, I support students individually with reading and writing needs using the Readers and Writers Workshop model. Whole class instruction is minimal, usually 10 minutes a period, focusing on guiding whole class sharing of demonstrations, observations, questions, and successes around what students are studying. The emphasis is on student talk. I focus on directing student questions back to the group and validating responses when necessary. As the year goes on, I'll need chime in less as the more confident students step up and my role focuses more on making sure all voices are heard. I assume a stance of non-authority and take on a learning, reading, writing role alongside my students. My relevant expertise is my literacy experience and self-knowledge, my own story as a reading and writing subject in need of liberation, and the ability to provide the invitation and maintain the investigation. I curate media, photographs, paintings, videos, and literary text selections, poems, stories, essays, comic strips, to evoke authentic student responses in discussion and writing and guide students towards self-selecting independent reading and writing choices, goals, record keeping, and reflection. Writing into the day, students and teacher use images and videos to practice analysis, literal identification, inferencing, drawing conclusions about author's purpose, and talking back to texts. Poem of the day. Poems are presented aloud, independently annotated, and discussed with the emphasis on how the text speaks to the reader using writing into the day practices. Reader's workshop. Independent, self-selected reading and writing about reading with peer and teacher support. Also, students and teacher read as writers and write as readers, notebooking, gathering topics of interest, reflecting on their experiences, using their lives as texts to analyze. Genre study and writing process. Students and teachers study genre text models, co-selected by the teacher and students, analyze them, establish genre criteria, and then practice writing within the genre, joining the course of authors across time and space, and comprehending the creation of texts from the inside. Also, students and teachers confer in flexible pairings about reading and writing to practice listening and speaking roles and to gird literary identity development, both independent and communal. Students also read each other's work and evaluate according to student-created criteria, celebrating each other's successes and encouraging growth. Over time, students begin co-curating media and text selection for whole group and paired discussion. The goal is for students to see the study and creation of literature as the cultivation of empathy and agency, what Freire calls full humanity, fellowship, and solidarity. As Freire stated, in problem-posing education, people develop their power to perceive critically the way they exist in the world with which and in which they find themselves. They come to the world not as a static reality, but as a reality in process, in transformation. Therefore, teachers for liberation cannot predict the ways in which students will fight for their liberation. Their role, on the contrary, is to create opportunities for students to identify contradictions and to act to, quote, unveil reality, end quote.